Throughout the ages, architects and engineers have designed and built the great structures that have made our world and withstood the test of time. Hi, I'm Ed Asner. Welcome to Architects and Engineers. Let's look now at modern steel frame buildings. This is the Empire State Building, a marvel of modern architecture. It was built to last. Architects and engineers of today use computers to design and engineer buildings that will endure the forces of nature, such as earthquakes, fires, and hurricanes. This modern skyscraper was also built to last. We've seen buildings completely destroyed like this before, but only when done intentionally. Danny Jowenko is the expert on this in Europe. What did he say?
Dit is controlled demolition.
Zeker weten.
Zeker weten. Er is nagesprongen. Dit is in opdracht gebeurd. Dit heeft een team gedaan van experts.
Let's compare. Explosives are used to demolish buildings like this in just seconds. Okay, so it's a controlled demolition. What's the problem with that? Well, it happened on the afternoon of 9/11 at the World Trade Center. Let's just think about this. Controlled demolitions cannot be engineered and rigged in a day. It takes months. And therefore, this event must have been planned in advance.
You hear that? Keep your eye on that building. It'll be coming down.
The building is about to blow up. Moving back. We are walking back. There's a building about to blow up.
Did they actually use the word brought down, and who was it that was telling you this?
The fire department, and they did use the word, we're going to have to bring it down.
And these people heard explosions.
We heard this sound that sounded like a clap of thunder. It looked like there was a shock wave ripping through the building, and the windows all busted out. About a second later, the bottom floor caves out. The building followed after that.
He takes his hand off, and you hear 3, 2, 1, and it was boom, 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 boom.
And these reporters recognized it as a controlled demolition.
And I turned in time to see what looked like a skyscraper implosion. It looked like it had been done by a demolition crew. The whole thing just collapsing down on itself.
For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
It was almost as if it were a planned implosion. It just pancaked.
So what's the problem if this was a planned demolition? Well, we are told by government agencies that this building came down as a result of normal office fires. The National Institute of Standards and Technology produced their final report in 2008.
World Trade Center 7 collapsed because of fires fueled by office furnishings. It did not collapse from explosives or from fuel oil fires.
But what do you think brought down the building?
And what caught my eye is more than 1,300 architects and engineers examine the evidence about Building 7's collapse and disagree with the official report issued by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. I certainly am much more open-minded about it than I was, and it is because of the involvement of the 9/11 families and all these engineers and architects.
You are about to hear from architect of 23 years, Richard Gage, AIA, member of the American Institute of Architects and founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Now there are more than 1,500 architects and engineers who say that it could not have been brought down by office fires. They are backed by 9/11 family members who are calling for an independent, unbiased investigation.
I'm Richard Gage. Fires have never before caused the collapse of any skyscraper. even though there are numerous examples of much hotter, larger, and longer-lasting fires in these buildings. And in the case of Building 7, the fire that NIST said started the collapse had actually burned out over an hour before. It could not have caused the collapse, as NIST claims. Yet this 47-story, modern steel-frame skyscraper, which was not hit by an airplane, collapses mostly into its own footprint like a house of cards, as fast as a bowling ball falling off the side of the building, in just under 7 seconds. Listen to the experts.
Building number 7 descended in free fall for the first 100 feet, which means that there was absolutely no resistance to the descent whatsoever.
NIST has admitted it went into free fall for 8 stories. And going from motionless to free fall instantly, that's a bothersome part of the puzzle because NIST never explained it.
I was amazed. It follows, and I'd look now at dozens of demolitions just to see what they look like, what is the nature, is experiments on how you bring a building down symmetrically, straight down and rapidly. You knock out the core first, the core goes down, the sidewalls lean in a little bit, and the building comes down rapidly because you've knocked out the support. Well, that's exactly how Building 7 came down. The dramatic collapse of World Trade Center 7 is something everyone ought to see. I suspect that few have actually looked at it to date. It's very dramatic. It would be helpful actually to show a demolition of some other building, which we know is controlled demolition. So you can see how it dips in the middle and comes straight down and rapidly. And also you see coming off the sides these jets of gas and debris, smoke puffing out of there. And that's very typical of explosive demolition. All these characteristics, the straight down fall and the rapid fall. And then you would look at, for comparison, Building 7, and you can see what I mean. It really does look like an explosive demolition. Something that needs to be explored very carefully, but the characteristics are there. So you look at the building, you see it dip in the middle first, and the sides bow in a little bit, and then you see it come down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, just like that. And right down onto its footprint. You see, that's the goal of controlled demolition. You don't want the building to tip over, which is much easier to do with explosives, actually. Just knock out the supports and let her tip. The trusses in the building made it very asymmetrical. There were 24 central columns, steel columns. And for those to fail in such a way that that building would collapse in the center first and then come straight down, instead of toppling over, for instance, no.
The entire roofline cascades downward neatly into its own footprint. At the same time, jets of debris can be seen shooting out of the walls and going up floor by floor. After viewing this video, NIST can simply declare, NIST has seen no evidence that the collapse of World Trade Center 7 was caused by bombs, missiles, or controlled demolition.
In the FEMA report, I think they were fairly honest. And it's interesting as you read what they said about Building 7. So I'm reading with great interest. At the end they say, well, our best hypothesis, now this is the fire and damage hypothesis. That's the only hypothesis they looked at seriously. Okay, so our best hypothesis, they said, has only a low probability of occurrence. And I'm saying, that's right. That's exactly right. Why don't you quantify that? But they didn't quantify it. But they did admit, it has only a low probability of occurrence, and that's to their credit. The 9/11 Commission didn't even mention Building 7 collapse,
NIST and FEMA published pictures of damage to the southwest wall at the 18th floor and minor roof damage. The NAST chart of the damages shows a substantial gouge in the south face from the 10th floor to the ground, affecting 3 of the structural columns. Here begin the problems in the NIST preliminary report on the collapse of World Trade Center 7. The first column to collapse is said to be column number 80, which was untouched by the structural damage. This is evident in the fall of the east penthouse, supported by column number 80. This precedes global collapse, but what happens next is not so easily explained. The building does not fall over in the direction of the gouging damage, and it does not fall over in the direction of the failed column beneath the east penthouse.
At approximately 5:20 p.m. on September 11, 2001, World Trade Center Building 7 collapsed in 6.5 seconds from normal office fires, according to the government's final report.
World Trade Center 7 collapsed because of fires fueled by office furnishings. It did not collapse from explosives or from fuel oil fires.
Later, the government finally admitted that Building 7 collapsed at the rate of free fall, after trying to deny it. So what's wrong with a building in free fall? What is free fall?
It's just like taking your car keys out and just dropping them. That's how fast the building came down, for over 100 feet.
This is high school physics.
A building cannot do free fall with 40,000 tons of structural steel in its structural system without it being blown up.
The only way that a building can accelerate as it collapses is by having pre-engineered, precisely timed, and precisely placed explosives. In other words, controlled demolition.
So NIST is forced in a public conference by members of 8E911 Truth, David Chandler in particular, to acknowledging that, oh, yeah, I guess it did come down by free fall. And they admit that in their final report, but they do not acknowledge the implications of that, which are that all of those columns had to have been removed at once. All 80 columns on each of at least 8 floors, because that's the distance for which the period of free fall occurred, 2¼ seconds, according to NIST. So this is rather incredible. You cannot have a building falling at free fall, which means not one of those columns gave any resistance, without all of them being taken out by explosives. And of course, NIST's whole theory is that there was a fire on the 12th floor, which caused expansion of beams, which caused a pushing of a girder off of its seat on a column 79, which caused the 13th floor to fall on the 12th, 11th, etc., which caused the interior of the building to cave in. And then that instability traveled laterally, and then, and only then, the entire building drops in 7 seconds. Of course, if all that was going on inside the building, which never could have happened for at least a dozen reasons, you would have seen massive telegraphing and warpage on the exterior perimeter structure, which the videos do not reveal at all.
NIST concedes that they found no evidence for explosives. So then we asked them, well, did you look? And they said, no, we did not look for explosives or residues of explosives.
The American Society of Civil Engineers was brought into this investigation early on. They did a very superficial investigation of the site. They issued a report without any significant forensic examination.
National Fire Protection Association Guide number 921 calls for saving the evidence and being prepared to justify why you wouldn't. It also calls for testing for accelerants and explosives when high-order damage is involved. NIST did not do this.
The minimum explosive charge, the 9 pounds, required to fail critical column IE79 would have produced a pressure wave that would have broken windows in the north and east, resulted in a sound level of 130 to 140 decibels, which is the equivalent sound to a gunshot blast. There were no witness reports of such a loud noise.
There were all kinds of firefighters and civilians that were reporting explosions.
You heard explosions, like boom. It's like a distinct sound. It's not like when in compression, like boom, 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 like floors that were dropping and collapsing. This was boom, and like you felt a rumble in the ground, like almost like you wanted to grab onto something.
Big explosion. Blew us back into the 8th floor.
I'm okay, all right?
Here, hold on. You want to call your mother or something?
Just the fact that there were explosions means they need to be investigated. Terrorists used explosives in '93. We had witnesses to explosions. We have audio recording of explosions. We have overwhelming evidence that there were some explosive events. The manual gets into thermite, and if it says if you have melted steel or concrete, which we had on 9/11, and there's videos of it, people can see it, we should test for it. It says when you have melted steel or concrete, you test for thermite. So the fact that they're not testing for it is crazy.
Keep your eye on that building. It'll be coming down. This building is about to blow up. Moving back. We are looking back. There's a building about to blow up.
We had 3,000, Americans murdered, and we had the first 3 high-rise and steel collapses. We have all these reports of explosions. We have the history of terrorists using explosives. It's absolutely ridiculous that there's no excuse for it. It's criminal, in my opinion. The national standards are very clear. We have preservation of evidence. We have spoliation of evidence. There's all kinds of basically standards that you don't destroy evidence. We don't have the real story on what happened because there wasn't a proper investigation done.
Whoa, 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 whoa.